The chain snapped so hard it echoed across the lake like a rifle crack. I slammed my brakes, and my old Ford F-250 skidded sideways on the gravel, coffee splashing across my flannel jacket, while diesel fumes rolled through the cold morning air. For a second, I honestly thought somebody had wrecked a truck across the road during the night. Then my headlights hit the gate. Brand new steel. Fresh concrete posts. Heavy chain. Bright white sign bolted dead center, like somebody wanted to make damn sure I saw it before sunrise. Private community access. Authorized residents only. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel while my engine idled rough in the dark. My cabins were right on the other side of that gate. 11 of them. 11 lake cabins my father built with his own hands almost 50 years ago. And some HOA lunatic had just locked me out of all of them. The smell of wet cedar drifted off the lake while fog rolled low across the water. I could barely see the cabin lights glowing through the trees. Families were staying there this weekend. Kids fishing off the dock. Couples renting boats. One family from Oklahoma had booked Cabin 7 for their anniversary. And now none of them could get out because somebody decided they owned my road overnight. Then I saw movement. 2 security guards stepped out of a golf cart parked beside the gate. One guy held a flashlight straight at my windshield like I was some criminal trying to sneak in. "Morning, sir," he said, calm as could be. "Roads closed to non-residents." Non-residents. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes your brain refuses to process stupidity that big before 6 a.m. You might want to rethink that sentence, I told him as I climbed out of the truck. Gravel crunched under my boots while cold air hit my face. I built this damn road. The younger guard shifted uncomfortably, but the older one just pointed toward the sign. "Orders from the HOA board, sir. Patricia Thornwell authorized the closure last night." There it was. Patricia. Of course it was Patricia. That woman had spent 2 straight years trying to turn our quiet lake into some luxury gated resort for retirees with too much money and not enough hobbies. She hated my cabins because regular working families stayed there. Fishermen, welders, truckers, veterans, families who cooked burgers on charcoal grills and tracked dirt onto wooden porches. Patricia wanted wine tastings and golf carts and property values high enough to scare regular people away. And now apparently she thought she could just erase me completely. Behind the gate, I heard shouting. A man in pajama pants was walking toward us from cabin 3 holding a little girl wrapped in a blanket. "Hey," he yelled through the fog. "We've been stuck in here for an hour. My wife needs her medication from town." The security guards ignored him. That's when I noticed something else. A propane delivery truck sat backed up halfway down the road behind the cabins. Stopped. Waiting. Which meant Patricia hadn't just blocked me. She'd blocked emergency access, deliveries, everybody. The old anger started building low in my chest, slow and hot, like a furnace kicking on. But I didn't yell. Didn't threaten anybody. That's the mistake most people make when somebody powerful pushes them around. They get loud too fast. My father taught me something different. Quiet men win longer battles. I pulled out my phone instead and started recording everything. The gate, the signs, the guards, the timestamp. One of the guards immediately looked nervous. "Good, sir," he muttered. "You can contact the HOA office Monday morning." Monday morning. I stared past him at the cabins glowing through the fog, and suddenly something felt wrong. Not emotionally. Legally. Patricia moved too fast. County approval. Security contractors. Concrete posts poured overnight. People like her only move that confidently when they think nobody understands the paperwork. And right there, standing in the cold beside my own locked road, I realized something Patricia Thornwell never bothered to check. That road wasn't HOA property. It wasn't county property. And it sure as hell wasn't community access. That road belonged to me. Every inch of it. Which meant the woman currently locking me out of my own cabins had just made the biggest mistake of her entire life. Where are you? Watching from tonight? Drop a comment below because this HOA thought they could steal 11 lake cabins from an old contractor in Texas without ever checking who owned the only road in. And trust me, what happened next nearly destroyed their entire neighborhood. I bought my first load of gravel for that road when I was 19 years old. Back then it was barely wide enough for one pickup truck to squeeze through without clipping the pine trees. My father used to joke that the road had more potholes than the county budget could afford. I can still hear the sound of his old bulldozer rattling through the trees at sunrise, while country radio played through blown-out speakers tied together with electrical tape. Every summer, we added a little more. Another layer of gravel. Another drainage ditch. Another section widened by hand. We did not build that place to get rich. We built it because my mother loved the lake. Cabin 1 was hers. Small porch. White rocking chair. Wind chimes that never survived Texas storms longer than a month. Cabin 2 became the fishing cabin where my Uncle Ray taught half the county's boys how to bait a hook without hooking themselves first. Cabin 4 had a crooked floor because my cousin Kenny tried building it after drinking too many beers during 4th of July weekend back in 1986. My father left the floor crooked on purpose just to embarrass him forever. That place was not some fancy resort. It was family history nailed together with cedar boards and hard work. Every cabin smelled like old wood, coffee, lake water, and charcoal smoke. People loved that, especially older folks. Men who spent 40 years working factories or construction jobs and just wanted somewhere quiet to fish with their grandkids without paying $500 a night for fake luxury. By the time I turned 58, those 11 cabins covered most of my bills. Nothing extravagant, but enough to keep me going after my wife passed 3 years earlier. Susan died from cancer 6 weeks before retirement. One day we were talking about buying an RV and driving through Tennessee in the fall. Next thing I knew, I was sitting alone on our porch listening to hospital machines in my head long after they shut them off. After that, the cabins became my routine, my purpose. Every morning started the same way. Coffee before sunrise. Check propane tanks. Walk the dock. Fix whatever broke overnight. Some people golf when they get older. I replaced water heaters and patched roofs. Kept my hands busy so my mind would stay quiet. Most weekends I knew every family staying there. The Johnsons from Oklahoma always rented Cabin 6 during catfish season. A retired truck driver named Earl came every October and cooked bacon outside at 5 in the morning while complaining about politicians nobody voted for. Kids rode bikes down the gravel road. Dogs jumped into the lake. Nobody cared if porch paint matched some HOA color chart. Then Patricia Thornwell started buying property around the lake. At first, people liked her. She wore clean pastel sweaters, drove a white Mercedes SUV, and talked like a real estate commercial come to life. "We are bringing opportunity to the community," she would say at town meetings with that fake smile that never quite reached her eyes. Opportunity usually means somebody richer is about to take your stuff. The first thing Patricia did was form the Lakeview Pines Homeowners Association. Then came the fancy entrance signs. Then private security. Then the rules. Boat colors. Fence heights. Approved landscaping. Quiet hours. She started talking about modernizing the shoreline experience, which is the kind of sentence people use when they want regular working folks gone. One afternoon she drove up while I was replacing boards on Cabin 8's dock. I remember the smell of sawdust floating over the water while cicadas screamed from the trees loud enough to make your ears ring. Patricia stepped out wearing spotless white sneakers that had clearly never touched mud before. She looked around the cabin slowly like she was inspecting damaged property after a tornado. "Grant," she said sweetly, "have you ever considered selling?" I kept drilling screws into the dock without looking up. "Nope. You could make a fortune with this land. Lakefront values are exploding. Good for the values." That smile tightened. Just a little. "You know, these cabins do not really fit the direction the community is moving." There it was. Not cabins. Not property. Direction. People like Patricia never say exactly what they mean at first. They test the water slowly. I finally looked at her and wiped sweat off my forehead with my sleeve. "Families fish here, Patricia." "Yes," she said carefully. "But imagine what this area could become." I already knew exactly what she imagined. Gated roads. Luxury homes. Expensive boat slips. Rich retirees drinking wine on patios while every piece of old lake history disappeared one cabin at a time. What Patricia never understood was this place was built long before her HOA existed. My father poured concrete on that road, while Patricia was probably still selling condos somewhere in Dallas. And buried underneath every inch of that gravel road was paperwork older and stronger than any HOA rule she could invent. The weird part was how fast everything changed after that conversation. It was like Patricia took my refusal personally. Before long, little things started happening around the lake that made no sense until you stepped back and looked at the full picture. First came the survey crews. 3 different times I caught men in bright orange vests walking along the edge of my road, carrying GPS equipment and clipboards. One guy actually hammered a marker stake right beside cabin 5 like he owned the place. "Can I help you?" I asked him one morning while he pretended to study a map. The poor guy looked nervous immediately. "Just doing measurements for the community expansion project, sir." Community expansion. Another one of Patricia's favorite phrases. I pulled the survey stake out of the ground right in front of him and handed it back. "This is private property." He packed his gear and left without another word. 2 days later, I got my first official violation notice taped to my front door. Improper road maintenance creating safety risk. I read the paper twice standing there in my kitchen while bacon grease popped in a skillet behind me. The road had survived 40 years of storms, delivery trucks, boat trailers, and Texas summers without anybody complaining once. But suddenly it was dangerous. Funny how that works when valuable land is involved. Then came the reviews online. 1-star ratings from people who had never stayed in my cabins. Complaints about unsafe access roads and poor community integration. I knew exactly where it was coming from because Patricia had started advertising her new luxury lakeside development on social media the same week. Her photos showed smiling couples holding wine glasses beside spotless modern homes with captions like exclusive private community living. My old cabins were never going to fit into that sales pitch. One afternoon, I drove into town for supplies and stopped at Miller's Hardware like I had done for 20 years. The old bell over the door jingled while country music played softly through dusty ceiling speakers. Hank Miller leaned across the counter when he saw me. "Grant," he muttered quietly. "You hear what they are saying at county meetings?" My stomach tightened immediately. "Depends who they is." Hank lowered his voice even more. "Patricia and the HOA board. They are pushing for road reassignment." I stared at him. Road reassignment is not even a real thing. I know that. But they are talking like your road should count as shared community access now. That was the first moment I realized Patricia was not just harassing me. She was building a paper trail. That is how people like her operate. They do not steal things quickly. They create enough paperwork and confusion that regular people get overwhelmed and give up. Every week, there was something new. Anonymous noise complaints. Environmental inspection requests. One letter claimed my cabins were increasing shoreline erosion. Another accused me of operating an unlicensed hospitality business, even though I had paid county lodging taxes longer than Patricia had lived near the lake. The worst part was watching neighbors slowly change around me. People I had known for years suddenly acted uncomfortable during conversations. Some avoided eye contact entirely. Patricia had started telling everyone the cabins were hurting property values. "Grant's place belongs to another era," she told people at HOA meetings. "We need progress." Progress. There was that word again. One Friday evening, I walked into the small diner near Highway 17 and felt the room go quiet for half a second. Not dramatic movie quiet, just enough to notice. Patricia sat in the corner booth with 3 HOA board members drinking iced tea. She smiled the second she saw me. "Grant," she called sweetly across the room. "I heard there was another complaint about your road this week. Such a shame." Everybody suddenly became very interested in their mashed potatoes. I walked over slowly and set my coffee cup down on her table. "You know what I think is a shame?" I asked calmly. Her smile froze a little. "What is that?" "People moving next to a lake and trying to erase everyone who was already here." One of the board members coughed into his napkin so hard I thought he might choke. Patricia leaned back in her seat. "Nobody is trying to erase you." "Really?" "Because somebody keeps filing paperwork against me every other day." She shrugged lightly. "The community has standards." "No," I said quietly. "The community has greed." You could feel the temperature change at that table instantly. But Patricia never lost that polished smile. "Careful, Grant. Refusing to cooperate usually makes these situations harder." That sentence stuck in my head all night while I sat outside cabin 2 listening to frogs croak near the dock. Not because it scared me, because it sounded rehearsed. Like somebody already believed the ending had been decided. Then 3 weeks later, I woke up before sunrise, drove toward my cabins with a truck full of propane tanks, and found a steel gate blocking the only road in. The gate stayed there all weekend. That was the part that really got under my skin. Patricia did not throw it up for a few hours to make a point. She acted like she already owned the place. By Saturday afternoon, the HOA had even added flower pots beside the entrance like they were decorating somebody else's funeral. I stood near the road watching SUV after SUV roll past the new sign, while angry cabin renters waited beside their cars with coolers and fishing poles. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with lake water under the Texas heat, while cicadas screamed from the trees loud enough to make your head ache. A young father from Kansas walked up holding his reservation papers. "Sir, are we still staying here or not?" I hated the look on his face because it reminded me of every hard-working family that saved money for months just to take one decent vacation together. "You are staying here," I told him. "I just need to get this sorted out." But deep down, I already knew this was bigger than a misunderstanding. Patricia had crossed into something dangerous. Around noon, a white HOA golf cart rolled up carrying Patricia herself along with two board members wearing matching polo shirts like they were campaigning for mayor. Patricia climbed out smiling under a giant sun hat, while the security guards straightened up around her immediately. "Grant," she said sweetly, "we really need to discuss your access situation calmly." Access situation. The woman talked about my family road like it was a printer issue at an office building. I folded my arms. "Move the gate." "We cannot do that." "You absolutely can." She glanced toward the waiting families beside the cabins. "This area has officially transitioned into managed community access under HOA authority." "No, it has not." The board voted unanimously. I almost laughed again. "Patricia, you cannot vote yourselves onto somebody else's property." One of the board members stepped forward holding a clipboard. "Sir, according to updated community planning documents, this roadway now serves as shared residential infrastructure." "Big words do not magically transfer ownership," I replied. Patricia's smile tightened just enough for me to notice. "Grant, nobody wants conflict here. But your cabins have become incompatible with the future vision of Lakeview Pines." There it was again. Vision. Future. Community enhancement. People like Patricia always wrap greed in pretty language first. Behind us, one of the renters finally lost patience. "My wife has insulin in town," he shouted. "Are you people serious right now?" Patricia barely even looked at him. "Emergency residents may submit temporary access requests through the HOA office Monday through Friday, between 9 and 4. The man stared at her like she had just announced gravity was optional. Even one of the security guards looked embarrassed now. I took a slow breath and kept my voice calm. "You blocked propane delivery trucks. You blocked guests. You blocked emergency vehicles. Temporary inconvenience," Patricia said smoothly. "Necessary for community safety restructuring." That sentence told me everything. She thought fancy words made illegal things sound official. Then she handed me an envelope. Thick paper. HOA letterhead. I opened it right there beside the road while sweat rolled down my neck under the afternoon heat. Notice of property noncompliance. According to the letter, my cabins were now considered non-approved commercial structures operating within HOA-governed territory. They were giving me 30 days to either join the HOA under new conditions or cease all rental operations permanently. I read the page twice while anger pulsed slowly through my chest. They wanted monthly HOA fees for every cabin, mandatory renovations, architectural inspections, even mandatory exterior paint colors. Patricia was not trying to improve the lake. She was trying to squeeze me until I either sold or failed. "You really thought this through," I said quietly. Patricia tilted her head slightly. "You left us no choice." "Funny thing is," I replied, folding the letter carefully, "I do not remember giving you any authority over my property." One of the board members finally got bold enough to speak up. "Your road connects directly into HOA land now. That makes this shared infrastructure." "No," I said. "That makes you confused." Patricia stepped closer, then lowered her voice, so only I could hear her. "Grant, people adapt or they get left behind. You cannot stop progress forever." I looked past her toward my cabins sitting quiet beside the lake. My father built those places before Patricia ever heard of Lakeview Pines. Families made memories there long before some HOA board decided they owned the future. Then my eyes drifted back toward the steel gate. Fresh concrete around the posts. Brand new locks. Professionally installed overnight. That part bothered me most. Because permanent structures usually require permits. Which meant one of two things happened. Either Patricia skipped county approval completely, or somebody at the county helped her do this fast. And suddenly this stopped feeling like neighborhood drama. This felt organized. Patricia climbed back into the golf cart and gave me one last polished smile. "I truly hope we can avoid legal complications." Then they drove away while the gate stayed locked behind them. I stood there another minute listening to the chain rattle softly in the wind. And for the first time since all this started, I stopped thinking emotionally and started thinking structurally. Roads, easements, access rights, county permits, property plats. My father kept every document he ever signed inside an old green metal filing cabinet back at the house. I had not opened that cabinet in years. But something told me Patricia Thornwell just made a mistake hidden somewhere deep inside those papers. That green filing cabinet weighed about as much as a refrigerator and smelled like old paper, motor oil, and dust baked by 40 Texas summers. My father kept it in the corner of the garage beside his rusted tackle boxes and a workbench covered in coffee stains older than some marriages. I dragged the bottom drawer open just after midnight, while a thunderstorm rolled across the lake outside. Rain hammered the metal roof overhead, while lightning flashed through the dusty garage windows every few seconds. I had papers spread everywhere. Property tax receipts, old insurance forms, septic permits, handwritten notes from my father in faded blue ink. The deeper I dug, the more nervous I became because none of this made sense. Patricia acted too confident. People bluff all the time, but they usually leave room for uncertainty. Patricia moved like somebody who thought the outcome was already guaranteed. Around 2 in the morning, I finally found the original county plat maps rolled inside a cracked cardboard tube. The paper was yellow with age and smelled like mildew and old libraries. I spread the map across the workbench and stared at it under a flickering overhead light. There it was. The road. Every foot of it. Clearly marked under our parcel number. No shared easement. No community ownership. No transfer. Nothing. I felt a wave of relief so strong, I almost laughed out loud. Patricia was wrong. Completely wrong. But then another thought hit me immediately after. If the paperwork was this clear, why was the county allowing her to block the road? That question kept me awake until sunrise. The next morning I drove straight into town and hired an attorney named Walter Green. Walter looked exactly how lawyers in small Texas towns are supposed to look. Gray mustache, cheap tie, office that smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. He skimmed through my paperwork while chewing mint gum loud enough to drive me insane. Well, he finally said, leaning back in his chair, this certainly appears favorable. Appears favorable? I repeated. Walter, she chained off my property. He shrugged lightly. Property disputes involving homeowner associations can become complicated. I hated that word immediately. Complicated usually means expensive. By the end of the meeting, Walter had charged me $3,000 just to begin filing paperwork. He promised emergency motions, temporary injunctions, fast action. But over the next 2 weeks, nothing moved fast except my bills. Meanwhile, Patricia kept tightening the screws. More cancellations rolled in every day. Families did not want to fight security guards just to reach their cabins. Online rumors spread that my property was under legal investigation. Somebody even posted drone footage of the gate online with dramatic music like my cabins were part of a crime scene. Then came the county inspection notices, fire safety reviews, septic system reevaluations, environmental compliance audits. Every agency suddenly wanted something from me at once. I spent entire days driving between offices carrying folders while clerks looked at me with polite exhaustion. You need to speak with zoning. That falls under county environmental review. We cannot override HOA jurisdiction. HOA jurisdiction. Hearing those words over and over started making me feel crazy. One afternoon, I finally snapped at a county employee after being transferred. 3 different times on the phone. They do not own the road, I said. I have the plats right here. The woman sighed like she had heard this argument already. Sir, according to updated planning records, the roadway currently functions as shared access infrastructure. Functions as is not the same thing as ownership. Silence. Then she quietly said something that made my stomach tighten. You may want to resolve this privately before the county becomes more involved. More involved. That sentence stuck with me all night. Somebody at the county was covering for Patricia, or at least helping her push this through quietly. I could feel it. Walter finally managed to get us into court for a temporary hearing 3 weeks later. I walked into that courtroom carrying enough paperwork to fill a toolbox. Patricia arrived wearing a cream-colored blazer with 2 HOA board members sitting behind her like backup singers. She smiled at me before the hearing even started. That bothered me more than anything. Confident people smile before victory. Nervous people avoid eye contact. Walter argued that the HOA illegally blocked private property access. Patricia's attorney stood up next and started throwing around phrases like community integration and shared development reliance. Half the room looked confused, including me. Then the judge spoke. Given the ongoing dispute regarding roadway classification, the court declines emergency injunctive relief pending further review. Just like that. No immediate order. No gate removal. Nothing. My chest felt hollow walking back to my truck afterward. Patricia caught up to me outside near the courthouse steps while the afternoon sun baked the parking lot hot enough to shimmer. I really did try to handle this peacefully, she said softly. I stared at her for a long second. You blocked families from their cabins. Temporary situations require temporary sacrifices. That road belongs to me. Her smile returned slowly. That depends who the county listens to. Then she walked away while her heels clicked across the concrete like little victory bells. That night, I sat alone on Cabin 1's porch listening to waves slap gently against the dock. The cabins were mostly empty now. No laughter. No grill smoking. No kids fishing at sunset. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps into your head if you let it stay too long. I looked down the dark gravel road toward the steel gate glowing faintly under security lights and finally admitted something to myself. I was losing. Patricia had money, lawyers, county connections, and an entire HOA backing her. All I had was old paperwork and a shrinking bank account. Then right before midnight, while searching through another box of documents my father left behind, I found a thin red folder buried underneath old bridge permits. Across the front, written in black marker, were 4 words that instantly made my pulse jump. Lakeview Access Approval File. The second I opened that red folder, I knew my father hid it for a reason. The papers inside were different from the other documents. Cleaner. More official. County seals. Engineering diagrams. Typed letters from zoning offices going all the way back, almost 15 years. I carried the whole folder into the kitchen and spread everything across the table while cold coffee sat untouched beside me. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows and thunder rolled far across the lake. Right on top was a county approval packet for the entire Lakeview Pines subdivision. Patricia's precious HOA neighborhood. I started reading slowly line by line, and about halfway through page 6 my heart started pounding hard enough that I could actually hear it. There was in plain English. All residential access for Lakeview Pines subdivision shall rely exclusively upon private access parcel 14, be pending maintained legal roadway status. I read it again, then again slower. Parcel 14B was my road. Not shared access. Not community infrastructure. Mine. The subdivision itself had been approved years ago only because county planners believed permanent legal access existed through my private roadway. Without that road, the entire neighborhood behind Patricia's fancy gates technically lost compliant emergency access. Fire trucks, ambulances, utility service, insurance classifications. Everything depended on that gravel road my father built decades before Patricia ever showed up. I leaned back slowly in my chair while the realization settled over me like a freight train. Patricia had spent 2 years trying to control the one thing holding her entire neighborhood together. And the craziest part? I honestly do not think she knew. I grabbed my phone immediately and called Walter, even though it was almost 1 in the morning. He answered sounding half asleep and irritated. "Grant, do you know what time it is?" "Read this," I said, snapping photos of the documents and sending them over. 30 seconds later, I heard papers rustling on his end. Then silence. Real silence. "Walter." Another few seconds passed. Finally he spoke, but this time his voice sounded completely different. "Awake. Where exactly did you find this?" "My father's records." "Good Lord." I sat forward. "Tell me I am not crazy." "You are not crazy," he said slowly. "If these documents are valid, then Lakeview Pines depends entirely on your roadway parcel for legal subdivision compliance." Meaning if roadway access becomes compromised, the county could potentially suspend occupancy status for portions of the HOA. I stared out the dark kitchen window toward the lake. "You are telling me Patricia built an entire power play around property she never actually controlled?" Walter let out a low whistle. "Grant, I think she may have cornered herself." The next morning we met at his office before sunrise. Walter had not even bothered with his usual lazy attitude. Coffee cups everywhere. Papers spread across his desk. Legal books stacked open like somebody preparing for trial. "Look at this section," he said, pointing to one paragraph in the county approval file. The subdivision was approved under conditional emergency access requirements because the lake limits secondary road development. I blinked at him. "English, Walter. Your road is the only legal entrance for over 200 homes." For a second, I honestly forgot how to breathe. All this time, Patricia acted like she held the leverage. But the entire HOA only existed because my family's road connected them to the outside world. Then Walter slid another paper across the desk. This gets even better. It was a maintenance agreement from 12 years earlier signed by the original subdivision developer. According to the contract, the HOA acknowledged in writing that Parcel 14B remained permanently private property under Holloway family ownership. Patricia's board had copies of this. They knew, or at least somebody knew. Suddenly, every weird county response started making more sense. Nobody wanted this issue exposed publicly because the liability could become enormous. Walter leaned forward. "Grant, listen carefully. Do not threaten anybody yet. Do not block the road. Do not lose your temper. I have not exactly been the screaming type lately." "Good. Because now we stop reacting emotionally and start thinking strategically." That word hit me hard. Strategically. My father used to say emotional men lose property disputes because anger makes people sloppy. Paperwork wins wars now, not fists. Walter explained everything slowly while highlighting sections with a yellow marker. The HOA could not legally block my road. More importantly, they depended on continued permission to use it. Technically, I had grounds to challenge access rights completely if they interfered with my ownership. I suddenly remembered Patricia standing beside the gate talking about progress and community vision while she casually threatened my entire livelihood. The woman truly believed she had already won, which meant she never bothered checking what happened if I stopped cooperating. By noon that same day, Walter filed formal notices with the county, the fire marshal's office, and the HOA attorney demanding immediate removal of the gate due to unlawful obstruction of a privately owned emergency access roadway. Then he looked at me across his desk and smiled for the first time since I hired him. "Grant," he said quietly, "I think we just found the pressure point." And sitting there with that old red folder in my lap, I finally felt something I had not felt in weeks. Not anger, not relief, control. The funny thing about power is that people get real nervous the second they realize they never actually had it. 48 hours after Walter filed those notices, the mood around Lakeview Pines changed completely. The security guards vanished first. One morning I drove down toward the gate expecting another argument, but the golf cart was gone and the guards had disappeared overnight like somebody pulled a fire alarm behind the scenes. The steel gate still stood there though, chained shut like a stubborn mistake nobody wanted to admit to. Then the county emails started rolling in. Fire marshal inquiries, emergency access reviews, insurance compliance requests. Somebody higher up had finally noticed the problem Patricia created, and now everybody was scrambling to protect themselves before lawyers got involved. I could almost feel the panic spreading through that neighborhood without even stepping inside it. Walter told me to stay patient. "Let them pressure themselves," he said during one of our calls. "Do not interrupt people while they are making mistakes." So I stopped arguing completely. No yelling, no public threats, no dramatic speeches. I just started documenting everything quietly. Every blocked propane delivery, every maintenance delay, every guest complaint, every HOA notice, every county email. I even photographed the gate from the same angle every morning at sunrise while fog rolled across the lake behind it. The chain hanging there became my favorite picture in the world. 3 days later, I got a call from a local contractor named Pete Lawson. Pete had been scheduled to pour foundations inside the HOA expansion area, but now his crews were getting stopped at the gate because county inspectors suddenly demanded updated roadway certifications. "Grant," Pete muttered over the phone. "What the hell is going on over there?" "Road ownership dispute," I answered calmly. Long silence. Then Pete sighed. "Patricia told everybody the HOA controlled access already." "Well," I said, staring at the gravel road outside my porch, "looks like Patricia skipped some homework." By the end of that week, rumors were spreading faster than summer wildfires. Homeowners inside Lakeview Pines started realizing the only legal entrance to their expensive neighborhood depended on a private road owned by the same guy Patricia spent months attacking publicly. You could practically smell the fear in town. One older couple stopped me outside Miller's Hardware, looking completely stressed out. "Grant," the husband asked carefully, "is it true emergency services could stop responding if this thing gets worse?" "I do not know," I answered honestly. "But the county sure seems worried about it." That answer traveled through the HOA like lightning. Suddenly, Patricia's perfect luxury community did not feel so secure anymore. The best part was I still had not made a single threat. Then Walter called me Friday morning sounding almost amused. "You are going to enjoy this." "What happened now?" Patricia's attorney requested an emergency mediation meeting. I leaned back in my porch chair slowly while morning sunlight reflected off the lake. Already, insurance companies started asking questions yesterday. I laughed for the first time in weeks. There it was. The real pressure point. Not emotions. Not HOA politics. Liability. Rich neighborhoods panic the second insurance gets nervous. Walter and I met Patricia's legal team at a conference room downtown Monday afternoon. The room smelled like printer toner and stale coffee. Patricia arrived wearing another expensive blazer, but this time her smile looked forced, tight around the edges, like somebody trying to hold a cracked plate together with tape. Her attorney opened immediately. "We believe this situation can be resolved cooperatively." Funny how people suddenly love cooperation when leverage changes sides. Walter slid copies of the county access approval across the table without saying a word. Patricia's attorney flipped through the pages slowly while Patricia stared at me across the table. "You knew?" she finally asked quietly. "Knew what?" I replied. "That the subdivision depended on your roadway." I shrugged lightly. "I know now." Her jaw tightened. For the first time since this nightmare started, Patricia looked uncertain. Not defeated yet, but uncertain. Huge difference. Walter leaned forward calmly. "Your HOA unlawfully obstructed a privately owned roadway tied directly to county emergency access compliance. My client has documented financial damages, interference with business operations, and possible liability concerns involving emergency service access." Patricia's attorney rubbed his forehead immediately. He already understood the disaster sitting in front of him. Patricia tried one last push. "Surely Grant understands the community only acted in good faith." I looked directly at her. "You locked families behind a steel gate." Silence. Real silence this time. Nobody had a polished HOA phrase ready for that one. Then Walter dropped the final piece onto the table. A formal notice prepared but not yet filed. Petition for roadway access review and compliance suspension. Patricia's attorney read the title and visibly paled, because everybody in that room understood what it meant. If the county formally reviewed access compliance, the entire HOA could spiral into legal chaos overnight. Patricia slowly looked up from the paperwork toward me. "What exactly do you want?" I thought about that question carefully because the truth surprised even me. I did not want revenge. I wanted my life back. My cabins. My road. My peace. I folded my hands on the table and answered calmly. "First, you remove the gate today. Then you stop pretending my property belongs to your HOA. After that, we can discuss whether I decide to keep letting your neighborhood use my road at all." And judging by the look on Patricia Thornwell's face, she finally understood who actually controlled the entrance to Lakeview Pines. The gate came down the next morning before sunrise. No announcement. No apology. I drove toward the lake around 5:30 with coffee in one hand and honestly thought I was still half asleep when I saw workers unbolting the steel posts from the concrete. Sparks flew through the dark while generators hummed beside the road. One of the workers looked embarrassed when he noticed me watching. "Morning, sir," he muttered quietly. "Morning," I answered. Then I parked my truck and just sat there listening to the sound of metal clanging onto a trailer while cold lake fog rolled across the gravel road. I had imagined that moment for weeks. Thought maybe I would feel victorious or angry or dramatic. Truth was, mostly I just felt tired. Tired of lawyers. Tired of paperwork. Tired of watching greedy people pretend ownership was some kind of popularity contest. By noon, the road looked almost normal again, except for the fresh concrete scars where Patricia's gate used to stand. But the real fireworks started later that evening during the emergency HOA board meeting. Apparently, word had spread fast after the mediation meeting. Homeowners inside Lakeview Pines were furious. Some were scared about insurance problems. Others were furious property values might drop. A few were demanding to know why the HOA spent months harassing the one property owner controlling their legal roadway access. Walter told me not to attend. Let them implode privately, he said. But around 6 that evening my phone started exploding with messages from people around town. Somebody recorded the HOA meeting and clips were already spreading online. So naturally I watched the whole thing from my porch with a plate of barbecue and a sweet tea while crickets chirped around the lake. It was beautiful. Patricia stood at the front of the clubhouse, trying desperately to sound in control while residents shouted over each other. "You told us the road belonged to the HOA," one man yelled. "My insurance agent called me this morning," another woman shouted. "Can emergency vehicles still get in here or not?" Patricia kept raising both hands trying to calm everybody down. "Please understand, this is simply a temporary legal clarification issue." Temporary legal clarification issue. That woman could turn a tornado into a vocabulary lesson. Then somebody near the back asked the question that finally cracked everything open. "Did you know the road was private before you put up that gate?" The room went dead quiet. Even through the phone recording you could feel the tension. Patricia hesitated just a second too long before answering. And that tiny pause told everybody everything. "The board acted based on available information," she said carefully. Bad answer. People started shouting immediately after that. One older man stood up red-faced and furious. "You almost got this entire neighborhood dragged into a lawsuit because you wanted to bully a cabin owner," another woman yelled. "You said he was violating community rules." Then somebody else shouted the line that honestly made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled my tea. "There would not even be a community without his road." Exactly. Patricia had spent months trying to look powerful while standing on top of the very thing she did not own. The next morning Walter called sounding almost cheerful for once. "You are going to like this update." Hit me. 3 HOA board members resigned overnight. I leaned back in my porch chair slowly. Already. And Patricia's real estate brokerage opened an internal review after several homeowners filed complaints. Now that surprised even me. Small town reputation matters, especially around property deals. If people start thinking you play loose with ownership rights, business dries up fast. But the biggest twist came 2 days later when county officials finally visited the lake personally. Real officials this time. Fire marshal, county zoning director, transportation compliance officer. They spent nearly 4 hours inspecting the roadway, reviewing maps, and measuring access widths while HOA residents watched nervously from golf carts. Patricia tried following them around smiling and explaining things, but nobody seemed interested anymore. At one point the zoning director walked straight over to me beside cabin 3. "Mr. Holloway," he said carefully, "we would like to discuss long-term roadway agreements moving forward." Funny how respectful people become once paperwork enters the room. "Happy to discuss it," I replied. "As long as everybody remembers whose road this actually is." He nodded immediately. No arguments this time. No fancy HOA language. Just reality. Later that afternoon, Walter handed me copies of the proposed settlement agreement. The HOA formally acknowledged my ownership of the roadway parcel. They agreed to stop all interference with cabin operations. They also accepted permanent responsibility for damages caused by the unlawful gate installation. But my favorite part sat near the bottom in plain black letters. The HOA recognized continued roadway use depended entirely upon maintained cooperation with the Holloway property owner. In simple English, behave yourself or lose access. Patricia signed the agreement 3 days later. No smile this time. No speeches about progress. Just a tired woman sitting across a conference table realizing she spent months trying to overpower somebody who already held all the leverage. As she stood to leave, she paused near the doorway and looked back at me quietly. "You could have destroyed this neighborhood." I looked out the window toward the lake shining under the afternoon sun. "No," I answered calmly. "I could have, but I did not." And honestly, I think that bothered Patricia Thornwell more than losing ever did. 6 months later, the lake finally sounded normal again. That might seem like a small thing, but when you live somewhere long enough, you notice silence differently. During all that HOA mess, the whole shoreline felt tense. People whispered instead of waved. Golf carts slowed down when they passed my cabins. Families stopped laughing as loud. But now, the place sounded alive again. Kids cannonballed off the dock behind cabin 7. Somebody burned burgers too long at cabin 4, and the smell drifted halfway across the water. Fishing boats hummed across the lake before sunrise while old men argued about bass like they were discussing world politics. Life came back. The cabins filled up faster than ever once the story spread around town. Turns out regular people really like hearing about somebody standing up to an HOA without losing their mind in the process. Especially older folks, veterans, contractors, small business owners, men who spent their whole lives building things with their hands instead of manipulating paperwork behind conference tables. One Saturday morning, I walked down the gravel road carrying a tackle box when I spotted something that honestly made me stop and smile. The old wooden sign my father built decades earlier had been cleaned up by one of the renters. Holloway Lake Cabins. Family owned since 1978. Somebody even repainted the faded letters by hand. I ran my fingers across the rough wood for a second while morning sunlight filtered through the pine trees overhead. Funny how close I came to losing all of it because one woman thought confidence mattered more than facts. Patricia disappeared from the lake almost completely after the settlement. Rumor around town was her brokerage quietly pushed her out after several angry homeowners filed complaints with the state licensing board. The HOA elected a retired firefighter named Bill Harper as the new president, which honestly felt like the universe correcting itself. Bill came by my porch one evening carrying 2 cold beers and looking uncomfortable. "Grant," he said, sitting down slowly, "I owe you an apology on behalf of the neighborhood." I waved him off. "You did not put up the gate." "No," he admitted, "but a lot of us stayed quiet while it happened." That part stuck with me because he was right. Most bad situations grow because decent people convince themselves it is easier not to get involved. We sat there watching the lake turn orange under the sunset while cicadas buzzed through the trees. Finally, Bill cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something honestly?" "Sure." "Why did you not shut the road down after everything?" I thought about it for a long minute before answering. The easy move would have been revenge. Legally, Walter said I probably could have made life very difficult for that HOA after the settlement. But revenge has a way of poisoning peaceful places if you let it grow too long. "Because families live here," I finally answered. "Kids live here." Most of those people had nothing to do with Patricia's ego trip. Bill nodded slowly like that answer surprised him. Truth was, I surprised myself a little too. A month later, the county officially recorded a permanent roadway agreement recognizing my ownership rights while protecting emergency access for the subdivision. Clean. Legal. Final. No more confusion. No more HOA fantasy stories about community control. Just facts on paper where they should have been from the beginning. Walter framed a copy of the agreement and jokingly called it the most expensive gravel road in Texas. I hung it inside cabin 1 right above the old photograph of my father standing beside his bulldozer back in 1978. Sometimes renters ask about it when they check in. I usually just smile and say, "Long story." But the truth is, that road taught me something important. Most people think power comes from money or titles, or who talks the loudest at meetings. It does not. Real power comes from knowing exactly what belongs to you and staying calm long enough to prove it. Patricia thought intimidation would beat patience. She thought paperwork was just a tool for people like her. What she never understood is the law works best for the people who actually respect it. Every permit, every plat map, every county filing, every old document my father saved inside that dusty green cabinet mattered. And honestly, there is probably a lesson in that for everybody listening right now. Keep your records. Know your rights. Read what you sign. Because sometimes the quiet old gravel road everybody ignores turns out to be the most valuable thing in the entire county. This morning I sat on the porch before sunrise with coffee warming my hands while fog rolled softly across the lake again. A little boy staying in cabin 2 rode his bicycle down the gravel road, laughing while his grandfather walked behind him carrying fishing poles. Tires crunched softly against the same road my father built all those years ago. No gates, no guards, no HOA signs, just peace. And as I watched that kid disappear toward the dock under the morning light, I realized something that made me smile into my coffee cup. My father was right all along. Quiet men really do win the long battles.